two, one.
We're live at Expert 35. I'm your host, Gabriel Garcia, and as promised, experts from 35 different industries talking about the challenges, the hardships, and the opportunities. And this week, we're going to be talking about the new opportunities. Texas just went through a horrific week, and it's going to take months to get back in shape. But there's so much uncertainty in the market that we thought we'd bring Andy talking about business brokering and like, should we get into business? Is this a good time to buy? What kind of businesses should we get into? So thank you so much for being on the show today, Andy.
Yeah, thanks, Gabe. I'm glad to be here.
Love the idea. I know Texas. I know you're in Texas, and I know it's been tough to kind of just get everything just running properly. But before we jump in there, guys, text Expert 35 to the number on the screen, and you'll be able to join the conversation. If you have other experts, we're looking for restoration companies. We're looking for people, plumbers, roofers. We're going to have Tony Batista. He's Floors to Love. He's going to talk about saving our floors. So there's a lot to be done in the home side, but there's even more to be done on the business side. It's been such a challenging couple of years, especially with COVID. And we've got Andy Erskine, business broker, Expert 72. Text Expert 72. You'll get his contact info. Man, Andy, it's a crazy market. Before we get into it, tell us a little bit, how did you get into business brokering? Tell us a little bit about you.
So I was a consultant to companies that use franchising as a growth strategy for almost a decade prior to becoming a business broker, and found First Choice Business Brokers as one of my clients in 2019, and really just decided to make a career shift. I didn't want to travel anymore. Being on the road for 150 days a year with trying to create, a life at home, it just didn't work out. So now, being a business broker, I get to stay at home, be with my beautiful girlfriend, Angelica, and work in my community and support my community.
That's awesome. And now you've seen it all. I mean, you've seen Texas go through hurricanes. You've seen Texas go through COVID. We've seen Ted Cruz go to the beach while we go through a freeze, right? So what was the market like, right? And what is it? And what do you think it's going to be like? So tell us a little bit about what COVID did to the business brokering market.
COVID brought to the business brokering market a huge shift, because business brokers in general, did a lot of business in person, face to face. And we didn't have that ability during the stay-at-home order. And with, COVID and the pandemic growing, we really had to transition to a virtual world. Thank God we have, systems like DocuSign and Zoom and everything else, so that we can communicate with people without having to be face to face. It's been a transition for a lot of our clients who haven't wanted to, convert to that virtual communication strategy. So it's been a learning curve for some of our clients, but overall, it's made us more effective as business brokers over the last year, being able to really leverage this. And, rather than spending 3 hours with the client and having 1 hour drive time, I now can meet with three clients at the same amount of time.
Right. And then the other thing too is, it's unprecedented how many businesses have been created because of the pandemic.
Yeah.
All these people that got laid off. And so there's a lot of great questions, like, if you're buying a business, should you make a business? Should you buy a business? Should you buy a franchise? I've got a great question from Jennifer Johnson. She says, what's the most important thing people don't consider when buying or selling their business? Let's just start with just like when they're selling their business.
Yeah. So what is the biggest thing that somebody doesn't think about when they sell their business? And it's showing a profit on their tax returns. That is number one. And I get it. None of us want to pay taxes, but if you're going to sell your business at some point, pay some taxes, please. It will make my life easier, and it'll make you get more money for your business. That's
right.
Really the simplest thing.
Sure. Yeah, because that's like a record, right? Now we're officially going to get Trump's tax returns, and you're going to see how the big boys play, right? And how they move all that around, and that's going to be a really interesting analysis. And it's true, right? In my case, Even buying a home is a business. Like it's a business decision. And if you don't show enough income on your tax return, the banks are like, well, we're not going to loan you money. And that's the same principle of like, well, you're not making any money. Why would you be valued at more? And why would the business buy? And what are the multipliers that you are seeing, right? And maybe by industry, in a couple of industries, maybe pick an industry and tell us what a multiplier is. If you're making a certain profit, like what are you seeing in terms of buying and selling that business?
So what I can tell you based off of a survey done by the International Business Broker Association that surveyed 3,500 business brokers last year, we saw across the board, it didn't matter whether the business was sold for $55,000 or $55 million. The average multiple last year was 2.3 of EBITDA. So 2.3x. And so that's very generic. The multiples went down last year, but when we look at industries like construction, home services, landscaping, really working in that residential space, those businesses flourished last year. And I mean, we've seen, some of these construction companies grow so fast, and same within the technology space. We've seen multipliers as high as 5x. 5 and 6x, which is just amazing. And so really, restaurants obviously are on the low end of that, closer to about 1 or 2. But construction, industrial industries, and in tech, high growing, fast growing tech has even higher multiples sometimes, depending on the opportunity.
So based on the market, right? And I would love to hear, are you bullish, right? Like, where's it going? Right. We got a new government. And I'm sure and I'm sure my answer has changed. My answer has changed because of what happened last week too. Right. So where, you hear these multipliers, the real question is like, are you thinking, the numbers are just going to grow because we're reopening, or are we like going to be in a really tough situation because we're kind of in a recession? Is it getting worse? Like, where are we going?
For business owners and people that want to be business owners, I think there's a lot of positives to keep an eye on. We have a new administration in place, which really won't affect us much. The reality is, let's not focus on the variables we don't control. We already voted, so let's move on and deal with what we can focus on. People had a misconception about having a job with the business during the pandemic or before the pandemic. They thought that was security, and they had a slap in the face when they realized that, oh, well, they're disposable. The companies, they downsized, or they went out of business, and that security blanket is gone. And so people are, coming out of corporate, whether they wanted to start their own business, they found a gap in, one of the industries that they could fill. They saw another opportunity to follow their dreams. So buyers are real. There are a lot of buyers that have been created since the pandemic started. And what we do know is, with shots coming out and things like that, we're going to get back to normal at some point. It's not an if, it's a when. And so we know there are a lot of people doubling down on these distressed assets. A lot of these restaurants have gone out of business because they really weren't profitable prior to the pandemic. And people can go in a business that used to be worth $500,000, they might be able to buy it for $100,000. And they know that they're going to have to tough it out for another 3 to 6 months, but they were, ready for that. I mean, they were financially ready to withstand the next 6 months of, low income or low gross revenues, to be ready for the next opportunity. And I think there's a lot of opportunity there right now. When you're looking at construction companies, if you're looking at something that's, highly profitable, or, an ideal industry right now, you're going to pay more money for the construction companies and the service companies, but they're still good businesses to be a part of. There's always going to be floods. There's always going to be fires. There's always going to be disasters. So plumbing, HVAC, fire and water restoration, flooring, those are all great businesses to be in.
Right. And one of my favorite stories from the Wall Street Journal yesterday, or maybe 2 days ago, was all these people, like Stanley Tools, which is not like this high-end tool company, but they were like, you know what? They saw that, all these big box stores were not ordering anything because of the pandemic. They're like, well, everybody's at home. Well, it turned out everybody at home was doing their own renovations, so everybody bought a drill. And Stanley played the game. He's like, I'm going to buy. I think they did $68 million in like all these tools investment, and they win. They're winning right now. They have the highest profitability ever. And so you got to be able to kind of analyze the business and say, well, why are they so profitable? Like, are they taking the right bet? And then what's coming out? I like the idea of like some of the distressed assets in that piece. Jennifer's got a great question about using your own money, right? So is it true? Don't use your own money when you're buying. So is it like buying an investment property, like borrow the money and like service the loan? What are your thoughts on that?
That's a great question. It really depends on the opportunity and what are your financial capabilities, right? If you have right now, interest loans are really low. Now they're going up a little bit, but if you can go get an SBA loan at 3.5% and not have to spend your own money, why would you spend your own money? At 3.5%, that's a great way to go. Seller carry financing is an option with some businesses. The sellers will finance, a portion of the total amount to a new buyer. But, really what I've seen this last year is most of our deals have been cash during the pandemic. And that's because they've been distressed assets and they've been really inexpensive. They said, well, for $55,000, I don't need to go get a loan. Why would I go get a loan for that? We're seeing SBA lending.
Well, and also remember, you nailed it. You said show a tax return. If the tax return was poor and that's why the distressed asset is going to be harder to get a loan, right? It doesn't matter how good your credit is. It's what you're like backing the credit up for, right?
Yeah. And, and that's another really good point. If the business doesn't show a profit and you want to go get SBA lending, or if the business hasn't been in business for at least 3 years, you're not going to get traditional lending sources. You're going to have to go find some other variation, whether it's a hard money lender or a family member that wants to give you that money, or home equity line, whatever it might be.
And I know Jeff's watching. So Jeff, you're a hard money lender. Ask us some tough questions. I'd love to see what he's thinking. Jennifer's also asking about franchises. Like in this economy, are franchises a good bet?
It really depends on who you are. Are you entrepreneurial or are you somebody that likes to follow systems and processes? If you need guidance in operating a business and you don't really know where to start, and you know that you want these things already in place, franchising is a great opportunity for somebody that wants to, really follow systems and processes. If you're an entrepreneur and you like to change things every day, don't become a franchisee because you will hate your life.
Right. And it's really important to know that the franchise model is not own one and be a millionaire, right? A lot of times the franchise model is own four and then you can have enough, right? Exactly. And know the business, right? I think, Dollar General is one of my least, favorite franchises out there because they really kind of they're there to buy the land, right? And if you're not into there to buy the land, then you're not going to make it. That's not the game. Know what the play is, and know what the exit strategy is. A lot of people think that they're going to buy, one franchise, and all they did is buy their job.
That's what happens in franchising, and I think people look at the franchise opportunity in the wrong light. They're looking at it more on an emotional level, that I love that brand or I love that product, without thinking about, what do they need to do to live off of? I know plenty of Subway franchisees who thought that they would, be able to make a living off of it. Well, come to find out, they had to have 3 Subway franchises to make the money that they want, just like you were saying about multi-unit operation. So you really have to look at the financials and talk to other franchisees to see if it can help you meet your personal goals on an annual basis as far as income that's coming into your home.
Yeah, and that's a great idea. And that's actually why it's important to work with somebody like you, because you'll not only help somebody sell a business, but also somebody buy a business, and you'll ask all these questions like, hey, what are your financial goals? Where are you financially now, right? Like that's part of the interview process, I imagine.
Yeah. And so with our buyers, when somebody comes to us and They say, look, I want to buy a business. I have a 32 question questionnaire that I send to every single buyer that I want them to fill out, because we ask them questions that they've never thought of before. I had a call with a buyer yesterday. I said, well, it's great. I understand you lost your corporate job and you were used to making $450,000 a year. You want to build a business, but how much do you really need to take home at the end of the day? With this new business, to make sure that it's viable and that you can still live. Right. And they never thought about it.
Yeah, no, and some people think, if you own a business, you have to be making six figures, because by the time you pay your self-employment and your insurance and all that other thing, some people are like, oh, I just want to make, this amount and I'll be happy. I was like, well, that amount times all the work, and now all the depreciation assets are yours. Now you've got to kind of like, there's just so much, pieces that it's hard for people to project. Most people think about the next month or the next year. And when you own the business, especially if it's an asset-based business, in fact, I had a great conversation with somebody yesterday that wants to get into surveying out here in the mountains. And I was like, well, like, what kind of equipment? And he's like, well, I need this, this, and this. And we started talking about the length, how long the equipment lasts. And that really kind of blew his mind, those questions. And I'm sure like that's kind of what you get into is like, hey, and especially if you're looking at, there's a great question about keeping key employees, right? If you're buying a business, like you got to also you're not just going to bring your team in, like you're going to keep some of those are going to be higher, more expensive, but that you're paying for that knowledge. What are your thoughts about keeping key employees after you buy a business?
I think it's critical. And, even before that is we work with so many small businesses. I mean, that's our bread and butter is a business brokerage. And so many business owners don't have key employees in place. And, you really want to build a business where you're not operating it on a day-to-day basis, or it relies on you to operate. So when a buyer is looking at a business, they want to see key employees in place. There are very few situations that I've been involved in that a new buyer comes in and just, turns the business upside down and shakes it and gets rid of all the employees. It doesn't happen very often.
Right. Wow. No, and it's important. And, I think the biggest challenges is like, well, moving forward, right? What's the right financial situation? Because you don't want to buy a franchise. Back to the franchise question. You don't want to buy a franchise if you don't have the finances to buy 2 or 3, if that's not going to be favorable for you. Right. And the market, like you have to kind of be able to project and see. I do agree with you. I think a lot of people get into a business emotionally, and that's great.
Yeah.
But also it's a business, right? Like it's almost like I feel like a lot of people fail at nonprofits because it's like, it's my passion. I'm like, I got it, but it's also a business, right? You have to make
a profit in a nonprofit.
Exactly. You still have to pay. You still have to pay rent. You still have to do these things, right? So, no, incredible. Great questions. There's actually even more questions in the lineup. Let's see. During COVID, there's a great question about COVID. What's going on in terms of due diligence, and are you able to really get in there and look at everything the same way that you used to before COVID?
Yeah, I mean, really, the only other difference is that we're wearing a mask now. Really, as far as due diligence goes, it was always a virtual process. All of the documents are in place: lease agreements, equipment list, financials. We have all of that documented in a really pretty portfolio that is given to a potential buyer. And then when we want to do a buyer-seller meeting, I mean, some of that is done virtually now, but a lot of times the buyer does want to go into the facility and look at it. And so we're doing in person like that, especially with these $1 million deals, somebody wants to go and touch and feel what they're about to invest in.
What's a, rough number out there? What's a rough, if you're going to put a down payment, if you're seller financing, right? What do people look for? Are they looking for like 20%? Are they looking like 50%? I mean, obviously every pie is different, but what's like a minimum amount that somebody should like be prepared to like put on there if they're getting seller financed?
20%. 20% would be pretty much minimum. What we see a lot of is in that 20 to 50% is what the seller wants as a down payment. And I recommend getting that 50% down if at all possible, because it minimizes the seller's risk.
Mhm. One other really good point that one of our other experts talked about, Jan, I'm going to do a shout out. She does commercial insurance. Is ask for, it's called the run rate or something like that. Like you have to ask for how many claims that company has had over the last 5 years, I think is what you're going to ask for, because that gives you insight to like how risky this business is, what kind of claims they got. Maybe they got a bunch of lawsuits, right? Because those aren't things that always show up on the tax return. They'll be like, oh, legal fees, right? Oh, well, we, whatever. But sometimes people don't put those on the tax return, right?
You have to ask a question.
Yeah, exactly. All right, Andy, my favorite part of the show, people are obviously super like scared about what's next. They're going to want to look at buying a business. They're going to want to look at even selling their business. 3 things to do now. And I'll take myself off the screen. So it's just you. Ready? Go.
Here you go. All right. So if you're thinking about selling your business anytime in the next 5 years, the first thing you need to do is pay your taxes. Show the IRS that you're making a profit, because we need to see that, whether your business is going to be sold with SBA lending, things like that. That's really important. Second is get your financials in order. If you don't know how to do it, hire a bookkeeper, because you should not be focusing on things that don't generate revenue. Let somebody else do that. And third is know what you want to get out of your business. If you haven't defined the vision or the goal of how much you want to sell your business for, get a coach and do strategic planning and have them help you achieve those goals. And I think that's it.
Hold on. There we go. I'm back in. We're learning. I'm actually not running the show today. Greg, thank you so much for running the show. We've had some technical complications, but Andy from Texas, man, stay warm and really, keep us in the loop. I would love to have you back and just, kind of do like a 1 month, 2 month check-in, see how things are doing, what businesses are hot, what businesses are cold. And, if you want to learn more, text sale to the number on the screen. Andy's going to help you. He will absolutely make sure that you're in the right path to get the highest return if you're trying to sell it, and also a really good deal that makes financial sense and really in line with what you want to do if you want to buy. So Andy, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks, Gabe. Thanks, Greg. It's always great to talk with you all.
All right, guys. Greg, put us on. We've got a couple more shows coming on. We're going to talk about flooring. We're going to talk about plumbing. We're going to talk about all kinds of challenges as Texas gets back on their feet. We couldn't have done it without our experts. Thank you, Jan. I know you're super busy. You're getting slammed. We'd love to talk to Bryce. He talks about personal lines. So we wish you guys the best, and really, we hope we're here and give you guys through these difficult times. Talk to you soon.
This is for a better tomorrow and a better today. Let's come together, and together we will find a way. You got questions?